The young and the restless spoilers since their first hesitant smile beneath the soft glow of the cafe's hanging lanterns, Daniel and Tessa have moved through the corridors of grief and guilt together, seeking solace in each other's arms as though they were two halves finally reunited. In those quiet moments, his fingers brushing the hair from her face, her head resting on his shoulder. They have seemed to transcend the tragedies of their pasts, reclaiming fragments of themselves that tragedy had stolen. Daniel, once bound by the quiet obligation to mourn a wife whose memory still haunted every corner of his heart, has come to accept that her physical absence does not mean his heart must dwell forever in the shadows. He tells himself that to love again is not betrayal, but a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Tessa, whose own history with Mariah carved deep lines of anxiety into her soul, realizes that lingering in the role of the second woman only prolongs her own anguish. Together, they have begun to forge a new chapter, one written not in the ink of past sorrows but in the vibrant hues of hope. Yet, as their laughter drifts across dinner tables and their stolen kisses warm the corridors of Daniel's home, the world outside watches with uneasy eyes. Whispers follow them through the hallways of corporate offices and curve around the corners of sidewalk cafes, a gentle murmur rising into disapproving clamor. Some say it is too soon, that memories are too fresh for new love to blossom, while others question her motives or scold him for daring to chase joy in the aftermath of loss. But Daniel and Tessa have agreed that their happiness is theirs alone to define. They have learned to let the voices drift past like the wind through autumn leaves. Heard but not heeded, because the beat of their own hearts, once heavy with sorrow, now urges them to live fully, unabashedly, in each precious present moment. As the sun sets on quiet suburban streets, however, a storm of a different sort is building at the heart of their newly formed bond. Lucy, his daughter, his little girl whose bright eyes once mirrored the warmth of her mother, has returned home bearing the weight of her own grief and resentment. When she learned that her father's affections had shifted from the memory of her mother to the living, breathing presence of Tessa, her pain solidified into anger. Without warning, she walked away from school, each step fueled by the conviction that no newcomer could ever replace the mother she lost. She crossed her arms against the breeze as she stood before the house where Daniel and Tessa's love has quietly taken root, a defiant silhouette bristling with hurt. To Lucy, this is no mere family expansion, it is an eviction of memory, a betrayal of everything she once believed to be sacred. When Tessa emerged from the front door, wrapped in the soft glow of early evening, Lucy's fury erupted in a torrent of bitter words. She accused Tessa of trying to steal the only piece of her mother that remained, of inserting herself where no one belonged. Tessa's eyes welled, brimming with a mixture of compassion and anguish, as she reached out, seeking to soothe her young friend's wounded heart. But Lucy recoiled, voices sharp as shards of glass slicing through the quiet dusk. Daniel, drawn by the heated exchange, appeared in the doorway just as Lucy's accusations fell upon Tessa like stones. His face, etched with the regret of past mistakes and the fierce love of a father unprepared for this tempest, hardened in a moment of protective instinct. He stepped between Tessa and Lucy, his tone trembling between anger and sorrow, demanding respect for the woman who had nurtured his broken spirit. In that charged instant, Tessa, so used to bearing the weight of blame, felt the full force of this young girl's grief-driven wrath, while Lucy saw the first flicker of anger in her father's eyes, a flame she feared could burn the fragile threads holding them together. The night that follows this confrontation unfolds like a tapestry woven with threads of fear, guilt, understanding, and love. In the hushed quiet of his study, Daniel finds Tessa seated at the edge of the sofa, her shoulders clenched as though bracing for impact. He sits beside her, reaching out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind her ear, and apologizes for the pain Lucy has caused, though he knows the real fault lies not with his daughter but with the situation itself. Tessa, voice barely above a whisper, confesses that she never wanted to feel like a conqueror stepping over his past, only a partner walking beside him toward the future. He reassures her that his heart holds enough space for all the love he has ever known. Past, present, and yet to come. Meanwhile, Lucy paces in her room above, the echo of raised voices replaying in her mind. She feels torn between her loyalty to her mother's memory and the undeniable warmth that Tessa's friendship offers in the lonely days since her mother's passing. In her chest, two opposing currents of grief and longing wage a silent war. By dawn, as pale sunlight filters through half-drawn curtains, a fragile peace descends upon the household. Daniel knocks gently on Lucy's door and invites her downstairs, where a simple breakfast waits, a silent olive branch of pancakes and orange juice arranged with the care of a father's yearning for reconciliation. Lucy hesitates, sweat beading at her temples, but the sight of Tessa's kind smile and the softness in Daniel's eyes draws her forward step by tentative step. They sit in uneasy silence at first, and then Daniel speaks. He acknowledges that change can feel like loss, that moving forward does not erase the past, but rather honors it by allowing joy to grow in its fertile soil. Tessa adds that love, far from being a zero-sum game, possesses an infinite capacity to heal and to bind hearts together in unexpected ways. As Lucy listens, tears slip down her cheeks, tears not only for the mother she dearly misses but also for the mother she has never known in this new chapter of her own life. In the days that follow, the fragile threads of trust begin to strengthen. Lucy returns to her school, carrying in her mind the memory of a breakfast that tasted like forgiveness. Daniel and Tessa resume their routine of quiet mornings and romantic evenings, mindful now of the silent observer in their home whose heart they both cherish. And as the seasons turn, the small family finds a new rhythm. A tapestry enriched by the threads of memory, loss, friendship, and love woven together into something both unexpected and beautiful. No longer strangers to one another's sorrow, they learn that through patience, understanding, and the willingness to embrace all facets of their shared pasts, they can forge a future that honors every piece of their journey. In the end, it is not the absence of pain but the courage to love beyond it that defines their story. And there, in that courageous love, lies their greatest hope. Since the first time they had sat together beneath the golden street lamp in the quiet courtyard, Daniel and Tessa have clung to each other as though their hearts were lifelines cast across a chasm of grief. In those early, fragile days, Daniel's memories of Heather, her laughter like wind chimes, the soft strength of her embrace, threatened to overwhelm him each morning. But whenever he looked into Tessa's eyes, he felt something he had not allowed himself in too long, the possibility of happiness. Tessa, in turn, had spent months haunted by her own past, unable to shake the guilt that she was too eager to embrace a love that, in her eyes, belonged to someone else. Together, they forged a bond born of mutual understanding, each willing to hold the other through tears of sorrow and moments of hesitant joy. Where once their conversations had been measured, as though addressing some forbidden subject, now they slipped into laughter at inside jokes, plans for Sunday morning walks, and whispered promises of a future built on healing rather than regret. The world outside their bubble was never far from their thoughts, yet in each other's arms they found a sanctuary where the names Heather and Mariah were honored without overshadowing the fragile new life they were trying to build. And yet, as love often proves, no happiness is immune to the forces beyond its fragile boundaries. Word of their growing closeness drifted through the corridors of Daniel's stately home and beyond into the circles of friends and colleagues. Some offered tentative congratulations, others muttered that Tessa was a replacement, that Daniel was only deluding himself by letting go of the past. But the truest shock came not from the world outside, nor from the chance acquaintance who found the news scandalous. It came from Lucy, Daniel's bright-eyed daughter, whose heart, tender from loss, had not yet learned that love can heal as much as it wounds. One late afternoon, Lucy returned from school without warning, her small body trembling with a resolve that took Daniel's breath away. She had seen Daniel and Tessa embrace on the porch. In her mind, that embrace was not a sign of moving forward but a betrayal of all she held sacred. Words tumbled from her lips in a torrent, accusations that Tessa was trying to push her mother's memory aside, demands that Daniel choose between her and this intruder. The final, devastating act came in a single command: get out. Tessa, wide-eyed and pale, stepped backward, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. Without another word, she turned and fled into the fading light, her shoulders shaking as she raced down the path that had once been walked in joy now turned into the road to heartbreak. As the door slammed behind Tessa, Daniel whirled to face Lucy. His own fury, sharp and raw, cut through the afternoon hush. "Lucy," he said, voice shaking, "this isn't new. You've known that we both needed a chance to find happiness again. Heather is gone. She died, and while I love her still, life does not pause in her absence." He closed the distance between them, but Lucy backed away, arms crossed, eyes blazing with tears and anger. "No," she sobbed, voice cracking with pain, "you don't understand. You're replacing her. You're choosing her over me." In that moment, the little girl who had once sought solace in her father's arms now stood across from him, wounded and unmoored. Daniel's chest tightened as he realized the depth of her suffering. Heather's death had not only left a void in his life, but had fractured Lucy's heart so profoundly that any attempt at rebuilding seemed, to her, an act of erasure. He raised his hands in a gesture of both surrender and plea. "Lucy, my sweet girl," he said softly, "I needed someone to share my days with. I needed a partner to love and to care for, just as I need you beside me. That doesn't mean I love your mother any less. You cannot condemn me, or Tessa, for seeking a life beyond sorrow." But Lucy only shook her head, the weight of her grief anchoring her to a place of unyielding pain. And in that unbearable stillness, father and daughter stood divided by truths they both held dear, each unable to traverse the chasm that had opened between them. Meanwhile, Tessa stumbled through the dusky streets, the tumult of her heart echoing in every pounding footstep. She had come to Daniel not to disrupt a family but to be a companion on life's unpredictable journey. Had offered not to replace Heather, but to stand beside Daniel so that neither would walk alone. Now, as her tears blurred the lamplight into halos of sorrow, she realized that her presence had become a source of anguish rather than comfort. The weight of Lucy's rejection threatened to crush her spirit entirely. Should she fight for this love, knowing she would always be seen as an interloper in the memory of a mother she had never met? Or should she step away, preserve the fragile peace Daniel needed with his daughter, and retreat into a solitude grazed by the soft ache of what might have been? In her mind, she played through every possible scenario, running back to Daniel's arms only to be rebuffed again, or slipping away forever and leaving Daniel to a loneliness that would haunt both of them. With each vision more dreadful than the last, she resolved that perhaps the only act of kindness she could offer was to dissolve her own longing and spare them further strife. She would ask for a break, a pause in their burgeoning romance, in hopes that time, gentle and impartial, could heal the rift she had inadvertently deepened. Late that night, as Daniel lay awake in a home that felt emptier than ever, his mind replayed Lucy's tears and Tessa's flight in relentless loops. He could still hear the echo of the slam that sent Tessa running, a sound that felt, in that moment, like the fracturing of every fragile bond he had tried to forge. How could he comfort his daughter without dimming the hope for his own happiness? How could he reach across the gulf to Tessa without abandoning the child whose world had spun out of control the day Heather died? The questions tormented him, but beneath the turmoil lay a simple truth. The love he felt for both Tessa and Lucy did not diminish, it compounded. He needed to find a way to honor Heather's memory, to support Lucy's grief, and to welcome Tessa's compassion and devotion into his life. As the hours crept toward dawn, Daniel rose and made his decision. At the first light of morning, he would seek out Tessa, wherever she might be, and speak from his heart, not with arguments or ultimatums, but with honesty, humility, and an unwavering promise to cherish them both. When the sun finally peeked over the horizon, Daniel found Tessa at the small park bench where they had shared their first stolen moment of laughter. She sat hunched, hands clasped, eyes red-rimmed, as though bracing herself for the worst. He approached quietly, each step weighted by hope and dread. When she at last looked up, he offered her a soft, grateful smile. "Tessa," he began, voice thick, "I can't pretend that last night was anything but a disaster, but I also know that my world is better with you in it. I won't ask you to fight my battles with Lucy, she needs me now more than ever, but I promise to stand by you, and to stand with you, in love and in respect. If we must give each other space, then let us agree on a time and a place to return, but please don't think that stepping away means stepping out of my heart." For a long moment, neither spoke, and then Tessa lifted a trembling hand to his cheek. Though her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, there was something in her gaze, a glimmer of the courage that had first drawn him to her. Slowly, she nodded. "I'll take the space you need," she whispered, "but remember that I'm not going anywhere forever. When you and Lucy are ready, I'll be here." And in that fragile accord, they found the slender beginnings of a new hope. A promise that love, patient and enduring, could eventually bridge even the deepest divides.